So, President-designate, thanks for an opportunity to have a quick chat today. I don't know that you are aware of this, but you won the lottery because I am old enough in this process, many decades, to remember when the idea of global stock takes originally began to germinate. And it took several years, actually, to continue to nurture that idea and understand what the role was going to be of the global stock takes and the periodicity and the transparency and the accountancy, all of that. Eventually, that was then included in the Paris Agreement, as you well know. And at that time, when we were working on that text, it was the idea of the first global stock take was only an idea. But you have won the lottery because you will preside over the first global stock take, which is quite a responsibility on your shoulders because you will be setting the standard for all of the other global stock takes to come. And it is a huge responsibility on your shoulders because not that we could have predicted this, and it's certainly not included in the Paris Agreement, but you are doing this in the middle of the unprecedented pandemic, in the middle of an economic paralysis, the likes of which we have never seen. But you're also doing this in the middle of a whole global process of green recovery packages, or I put the word green in there because that's my wish, but certainly recovery packages. So I would just love to hear from you how we are definitely in a crisis, but as we know from Chinese wisdom, every crisis is only an opportunity. And I would love to know from you both sides, how you have experienced this as a crisis, but also how you are moving through it to convert it into a historical opportunity.
Well, Christiana, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure and actually an honor to have an opportunity to have this discussion with you. You're absolutely right. We are living in quite unprecedented times. There's no doubt about that at all. I came into this role in the middle of February, and one of the first events that I went to within literally a matter of days was at Wilton Park, which, as you know, is where the Foreign Office in the UK has its conference centre. And I had this unique privilege to be able to meet in that one meeting, everyone from Laurent Fabius to Laurence Viviana to Manuel Colga-Vidal, everyone who's sort of steeped in previous COPs, and that was a sort of a wonderful occasion and a great sort of learning process in a very short period of time. I then had an opportunity to go early on in March to the UN. I had an opportunity to meet with the permanent representatives and of course address the UN as well alongside the Secretary General. And what was really interesting about that was the conversations that I had and this real desire for us to make COP26 a success, for us collectively to work to tackle climate change. And it was also actually a really poignant visit because when I was in New York, the news came through that the first death in the UK from COVID had taken place. And incredibly sad, but of course what was even more poignant was the fact that this was an individual who had lived in the area that I represent as a member of Parliament. As you say, since that time in early March, we have had this unprecedented time, governments, ministers across the world working night and day. But I think if we look at the sort of packages that have been coming out, absolutely, I think they are underlining this green recovery. And I do think we are at that tipping point where business, civil society, individuals, but also governments are realizing that we do need to build back better. And from a UK perspective, we've set out some of those green measures in terms of that green recovery. And I feel confident, actually, that we are at that point where we're going to go forward collectively and achieve what I think, perhaps some months ago, we wouldn't have thought that was possible, and that is the momentum for a green recovery.
Well, and I have been very public about the fact that when the first conversations were afoot about delaying the date of COP26, I was frankly not enthused with that because I think that deadlines are healthy and we all stand up to the challenge of deadlines. However, I am delighted to have been wrong, and I admit it publicly because now my sense is that we have those extra 12 months to garner the force, the motivating engine of the private sector, of civil society, of individuals, of the finance sector, who I really think are galvanizing around the big picture of addressing climate change. And well, you're in the UK, I am not, but I'm sure you saw, just to use one example, the remarkable announcement of BP, the transition that BP is actually engaged in, being one of the leaders of the oil and gas industry. And they're not alone. There's just a whole host. Every week, I see at least 2-3 large corporations really come out and say, we have understood that we have to be part of this conversation and part of this solution. And I do think that corporate and investment moving forward will help to give the courage and the confidence to governments who need to be in the front lines at COP26, give them the confidence that they need to do what they need to do at the first global stocktake, which is increase ambition. But I can say that rather easily because I no longer have the responsibility to be coordinating with governments like you do. And I see a lot of movement outside what we call stakeholders, but not necessarily in governments. And the European Union has taken an incredible leadership position with a new NDC coming forward. And certainly with their green recovery packages that they have actually already been able to approve. But I'm curious to know your experience because outside of the European Union, and you must speak to all of these governments, that is your responsibility. Do you see a equal understanding, or at least an emerging understanding on the part of governments of both the impact of recovery packages on the carbon intensity of the global economy over the next few decades, as well as how can they leverage those recovery packages to converge the solutions for so many crises? Because yes, we have converged the crisis, not that we asked for it, but they have converged. But we can converge the solutions if governments understand that that is an opportunity. Are you beginning to see the light at the end of that tunnel with other governments outside of the EU, that this actually is an extraordinary opportunity to address climate, to address biodiversity, inequality, and so many other issues?
Yeah, well, Christiana, I think it's a really great question. And despite the fact that we've been in this COVID crisis period where we are doing everything short term to support businesses, support livelihoods of our people. Of course, I mean, the climate crisis hasn't taken time off. And I have had some bilateral discussions with over 35 countries, ministers in 35 countries, and we're continuing that engagement as well. And I'm very keen in those conversations to emphasize that actually, if ever there was a time to come forward with green recovery packages, this is it. And you will have seen yourself, the polling, the opinion polling that has gone on internationally as well, where actually it doesn't matter where you are in the world. This is that moment where populations across the world want this to be a lasting recovery and a sustainable recovery as well. And that, of course, means a green recovery. So I'm very keen when I have those conversations to tell fellow ministers that we need to come forward with ambitious NDCs, with ambitious long-term strategies. But of course, in terms of the packages that governments are announcing right now, they need to have very much a sort of a green thread, if I can put it, through all the announcements that they're making. And I think that is recognized. And you said you've seen that in countries in Europe, you're seeing that in countries in other parts of the world. And of course, ultimately, it's also up to each of us as individual governments to do our bit. And from a UK government, as I said, we've set out proposals, and we will be doing more of this in the coming months. So I am actually hopeful. And you made a really important point there about businesses, and businesses are actually driving this change themselves as well. We've set up a business advisory council made up of international business leaders. I had the first meeting last week. And again, they are absolutely galvanized around this. And there is a recognition, firstly, because it is, of course, the right thing to do to set science-based targets, getting to net zero. But ultimately, what I think many businesses also realize is it is good for the bottom line as well in doing this. So I do think we are at that sort of inflection point where everyone is coming together and recognizing that we need to have this green recovery.
And I also wanted to ask you about the UK NDC, because this will be the first time that the UK presents its own NDC post-Brexit. And the European Union has already come forward with where they're going to be. I believe I have been aware of the fact that the cabinet in the UK has already made a proposal for a rather ambitious NDC, but that is only a proposal. And so I was curious to know what you can share about that process of the UK coming forward with a strong and ambitious NDC, given the fact that I know from so many years that the COP presidencies always need to role model what they want to see from other countries. So would love to know where you see that going in hopefully the next few weeks or months.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you for that. You will forgive me if I don't go into the details of the discussions that we're having in cabinet. What I can tell you is the process. Look, firstly, I do recognise that as a presidency, we need to show ambition ourselves, just as we're asking others to do. And actually, in terms of the process, our Prime Minister set up 2 committees when it comes to climate action. It's the first time we've done this in a UK government. One is a strategy committee, which looks at climate action, which the Prime Minister chairs. The other is a implementation committee, which I chair. And sitting on these committees are the cabinet ministers who are responsible for departments which themselves have responsibility for parts of our economy, which, of course, we need to address emissions. So transport, agriculture, housing. And we are systematically going through looking at what policies we need to put in place to enable us to meet our carbon budgets. So there is a lot of systematic work going on. But I understand that the desire for us to come forward and people to know where we are. But all I can say to you at this stage is that we are working very hard. We're working very hard, and I hope in due course we will be able to come forward with something positive.
I have full confidence, and I know the intricacies of government working, so I'm not surprised that you've had to set up that process. But I'm trying to pull the threads together of this conversation, and it seems to me that what we've been talking about from different perspectives is the emergence of what can be recognized as a virtuous cycle here, where governments are beginning to feel the confidence to move forward, where corporates are definitely in the lead, pushing. Very interestingly, where individuals and citizens have much higher expectations, especially now in a post-COVID world, much higher expectations, both of governments as well as corporates, and where their expectation is the hard wall that used to divide corporates from governments is actually coming down, my sense is, because corporates are now being expected to contribute to the environmental and social solutions in addition to their own profitability. It's just no longer enough to just be profitable. You have to put profit, people, and planet on your bottom line, or else you're just not going to be blessed by social tolerance and certainly not by client preference. But from governments, I also see that there is a lot of expectation of citizens of their governments to stand up and act more responsibly in protection of their citizens' interests and well-being. And so that for me, and the third leg of that, of course, is the financial sector that is beginning to see that the relationship between risk and reward has completely changed around, and that they cannot continue to put capital into high-risk stranded assets that are going to deplete their value of their investment portfolio or of their assets. So those three pieces, seems to me, are really working better with each other. They were always there, and they've always done sort of cross-boundary collaboration. But my sense is that there is more and more awareness that those are three pieces that are together creating this virtuous cycle of a race to the top, and the sense of urgency that science has been giving us for such a long time is now beginning to rub off on those three sectors as well. I have a sense that urgency is now really beginning to penetrate into decisions of all three. Is that your sense, or would you agree that there's a virtuous cycle that is starting here, and hopefully that the speed and scale of that virtuous cycle is increasing?
Yes, I would agree with that entirely, and I think what you're talking about as a phenomenon is something that is very live, and I think it is actually speeding up. And quite rightly, people have expectations of their governments. They have expectations of businesses, and from a COP perspective, I'm very keen that COP26 is as inclusive as we possibly can be. I think that's absolutely vital, and I think the voice of civil society, the voice of youth, the voice of indigenous peoples, that absolutely has to come through. That is, for me, that is a non-negotiable issue. We need to make sure that our people are able to speak up and their voice is actually heard. And as part of this, one of the things that we are doing is setting up an advisory group on COP26, again, an international advisory group bringing together youth and civil society, and we'll be launching that shortly. And I want to hear from them, and I want to hear their ideas, and we want to try and incorporate that as part of COP26. But again, businesses. When I had my discussion with our business group, we concluded that actually what we can't do is just have these meetings in silos. What we need to do is put together the businesses together with the youth, together with civil society. And I want to be doing a lot more of that over the coming year. And one of the points that I make in every single conversation that I have, whether it's with businesses or with governments or with NGOs or civil society or youth groups, is that success at COP26 is going to belong to all of us. Yes, the UK and our friends in Italy, we are sort of organizing from a presidency point of view, but I'm very mindful of the fact that this needs to be entirely collaborative, and we need to make sure that at the end of that process, everybody feels involved and everybody feels that we have achieved something lasting. And if we can do that, I think we will absolutely be able to look at each other and say, yes, we made this a success.
Well, I would certainly agree with you, and I think you have totally stepped into the role of COP president so beautifully with that as your North Star, because that is exactly the role and the responsibility of the COP president is to lead in collaboration and lead and foster the collaboration and the collective success as you see it. I'm very curious to also know from you, with that goal in mind and walking toward that North Star, where do you see your major challenges, and where do you see the major opportunities on the horizon?
Well, Christiana, you've been described as the architect of Paris, and I would love to get your thoughts on, your advice, quite frankly, on what we ought to be doing, what I in my role ought to be doing over the next 14, 15 months. And of course, every COP we go into is a unique set of circumstances in terms of global politics, in terms of the global environment. Of course, as we've just discussed, COVID is something that's sort of quite unprecedented. So I'd love to get your thoughts. But for me, the success factors in terms of what we achieve, of course, the firstly is that at the end of this process, I would like for all of us collectively to say we did our best. We did our best for generations now, generations in the future, and as part of that, that we've encouraged countries, and countries have come forward with those ambitious NDCs and long-term strategies. That we have made progress in terms of the negotiations, which of course are a very vital part of any COP. We've got 5 campaigns that we've got up and running, and you are one of our wonderful friends of COP as well, who is working with us on this. So in terms of clean transport, clean energy, adaptation, resilience, nature-based solutions, of course, finance, tying the whole thing together. And what I really want at the end of this process is, for particularly those countries that are at the forefront of feeling the effects of climate change, to feel that we have delivered for them. When I was in New York, I had an opportunity to meet with the permanent representatives from the small island developing states, and I was really struck by what one of them said to me. And she said, if we don't make progress, if we don't have global ambition, many of us around this table in some years from now are not going to have a place that we call home. And that has really stayed with me. And I think that's what we want to do, is we want to bring about some lasting change where those who are at the forefront are feeling the impacts of climate change, and actually they're not the people responsible, they feel that we have delivered through this process.
Yes. No, I'm very glad that you bring that up, because that survival of so many small islands and in fact so many coastal regions of mainland countries is something that that needs to be burned into our soul, right? That is our responsibility, to ensure that we are not condemning those people and that we are not condemning future generations to a world of misery. That is absolutely our shared responsibility from a moral point of view, and needs, as I say, to be seared into our souls and be the last thought in the evening when we go to bed, or 2 o'clock in the morning, depending on when you go to bed, and the first thing in the morning when we wake up. Now, in between there, my sense is that we are on the cusp of, hopefully, on the cusp of understanding that while addressing climate change and reducing emissions and absorbing more carbon out of the atmosphere than we're emitting, while all of that is a responsibility because of the high vulnerability and the survival right of all of these people, that is a responsibility. But we have to be able to understand, and I think we're really accelerating our understanding about this, it is not therefore necessarily a burden. It is a responsibility, but it is not a burden. It is a responsibility and an opportunity, which is a very different way of thinking about it. And if you ask me, what over the next few months or year really needs to shift, it is our attitude toward this. It is really understanding that we have this historical moment in which we can prove that doing the right thing via our morale, the right thing for the most vulnerable people, is also the right thing via economics, technology, citizen engagement. I mean, there is such an alignment. If we had to choose between doing the right thing for those highly vulnerable people and creating a profitable, quality growth world, well, that would be a choice that people would choose one way or the other, depending on whether you are moved by morality or by profitability. But fortunately, we don't have to choose, right? And that is, I think, the huge lesson that can really be not just relearned by all of us, but practiced by all of us, to understand that this is an incredible moment in the history of humankind in which we can do the right thing for those that are most vulnerable, and at the same time sow the seeds of quality growth for everyone. We can be a world that is a thriving world. We can choose to have and create a world that is in fact even much better than the one we have now. We can choose a world that is healthier, that has less air pollution, that has much better urban conditions, that has much better soil fertility conditions, that certainly has much better transport, that has much better infrastructure, on and on and on and on. We can choose all of that and thereby protect the future of the most vulnerable. So how fantastic is that? Honestly, I get up every morning and I thank whoever the powers that be that we have that alignment right now, because it hasn't always been that evident. And in as much as we can understand that that alignment is before us, it just makes the necessary decisions much easier to take. So that is my little bit of philosophy for today.
Well, Christiana, that is a brilliant piece of philosophy because, of course, you are absolutely right. And one of the statistics that I always use in terms of the United Kingdom is that over the last 30 years, we have managed to grow our economy by 75%, GDP up by 75%, but at the same time, we have managed to cut emissions by 43%. And you're absolutely right. I mean, business, technological change, that is what is going to help us drive down emissions. I mean, we just have to look at the price of offshore wind, solar, other renewables, all of that driven forward over the last few decades because there's been a real desire also on the part of businesses to make progress when it comes to climate action. But of course, as you say as well, there is an economic benefit of this. And, as you've said, and I entirely agree with you, all the conversations that I have had suggest that, this is that time. This is the time where we have this fabulous opportunity to bring businesses, governments, and what civil society and young people want even closer together. We have this shared endeavor, and I think we owe it, quite frankly, each of us who is involved in this process. As I say, you're an incredibly influential person. You're going to be part of this as a friend of COP, but each of us has that role to play to drive forward change. As I said, at the end of this COP26 process, I want to be able to look actually my children in the eye and say to them that collectively we came together and we did some good.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about your children, because I can't tell you, I have two British friends with whom I co-host a podcast, Outrage and Optimism, and we interview many leaders from many different sectors. And I can't tell you how many of them share with us that what has actually made them shift in their attitude and shift their decision-making process is precisely the questions of their children, thinking of their children, talking to their children, and really waking up to the responsibility here that we are only stewards of their reality, and that we are collectively determining what they will experience. By the time they get to the tables that we sit at, it will be too late if we have not done the right thing. And so there is a huge generational responsibility there to ensure that we are doing the right thing by our children and our grandchildren. It's actually a little bit scary to think that my daughters are in their early 30s. By the time they get to the major decision tables, that will probably take 10 years 15 years, by that time, we will already have determined the trajectory of the economy and of the planet and of the quality of life, of human life on this planet. That's a pretty scary thought. And it just puts a huge amount of responsibility on our collective shoulders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let me end with a bit of an anecdote, which is that in government, I've been lucky enough to have a number of jobs in different departments, and whilst my daughters who are in their sort of late teens are one of them sort of just turned 21, whilst they have always shown some interest. I can't say it's been at the forefront of their mind what role I've got in government. But when I was appointed by Prime Minister Boris Johnson to this role as COP26 President-designate, I got a text message from one of my daughters, and it had a link to an article on the BBC, talking about my appointment, but also then, talking about basically the challenge that we had in front of us. And accompanying this link, there were those three words, which were "get it done." So I feel that sense of pressure at home to make sure we collectively get it done. And I genuinely believe that we can. I'm very positive about the future. I'm positive about the fact that working together, we can bring about this change for the better.
Well, here's to your daughter, who has given us the collective commandment: get it done. And I'm sure you understand that that is not just to you personally, but that is a collective, as you say, a collective. Let's get it done. The good news is that we can get it done. And I thank you for your willingness to assume the leadership in this very, very difficult moment. And I certainly will do everything that I can to ensure that you go back to your daughter and said, we did get it done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christiana. I'm so pleased that I have you alongside me on this journey over the next 14, 15 months.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon, I know.